What if the crime scene you trusted wasn't the truth at all, but a staged performance meant to hide what really happened? This isn't just the story of a disappearance. It's a story of betrayal, of lies buried deep in mid-century America. Tonight, we revisit the chilling night a 15-year-old babysitter vanished from a quiet Wisconsin home. And before this hour is over, I'll reveal the message that shattered everything we thought we knew. My name is Detective Daniel, and you're welcome to my channel. Before we begin, subscribe and drop your name and where in the world you're watching from in the comments, because what you're about to hear isn't just a mystery, it's a disappearance so haunting it forced America to change its laws forever. October 24th, 1953. A crisp autumn evening in Crosse, Wisconsin. 15-year-old Evelyn Hartley was like any other teenager, responsible, well-liked, and eager to help. That night, she agreed to babysit at the Hofer home, a quiet middle-class house that seemed safe in every way. Her father had one request: call home every hour. It was a simple routine, a safeguard. Evelyn agreed. At 7 p.m. she walked through the Hofer's door carrying her school books. She planned to read, study, and watch over the little girl asleep upstairs. The neighborhood was calm. The house glowed softly under its porch light. Inside, the clock ticked. A record player sat silent. For Evelyn, it was supposed to be an ordinary night. But silence has a way of becoming suspicious. 8 o'clock passed. No phone call home. 9 o'clock passed. Still nothing. By 9:30, her father grew uneasy. Evelyn was not the kind of daughter to forget. At 10:30, concern turned to dread. He drove across town, headlights cutting through the night, pulling into the Hofer driveway. He expected to see her reading on the couch or pacing upstairs. Instead, he saw a house still lit, but disturbingly silent. The minutes between Evelyn's last smile and that drive across town hold the secret. They are the last confirmed moments of her life. But what happened next would shatter the entire timeline. When Evelyn's father stepped inside the Hofer home, the scene didn't look right. It didn't feel right. A lamp lay toppled on the floor, its light casting strange shadows across the room, like a frozen moment of struggle. Her glasses bent, broken, abandoned. Her shoes left behind, neatly at first glance, but in a way that spoke of sudden interruption. And the doors, some ajar, others wide open, like someone wanted a fast way in, or a fast way out. In the basement, investigators found something even more disturbing. A window screen had been forced out, metal bent with fresh pry marks. It wasn't an accident. Someone had been there. Someone had used that window. Outside, drops of blood, small at first, almost missed, but when tested, they matched Evelyn's blood type, and that discovery changed everything. Did Evelyn fight back against someone inside that house? Did her attacker break in through the basement, or drag her out that way? Why leave behind her glasses, her shoes, the very items she needed most? The evidence painted a picture of intrusion, but it also looked staged, almost too perfect, like a scene arranged to tell a false story. And one item left behind would later tell investigators everything they missed that night. By 10:45 p.m., panic had taken hold. Evelyn's father dialed the police, his voice tight, reporting what no parent ever wants to say. "My daughter is missing." Within minutes, squad cars pulled into the quiet Crosse street. Flashlights cut across the yard. Neighbors spilled from their homes, some clutching coats, others holding lanterns. Together they began combing the property inch by inch. It didn't take long before the first clues emerged. Blood on the grass, just outside the basement window. A bloody handprint smeared on a nearby house. Footprints pressed deep into the soil, leading away into the night. Search dogs were brought in, noses pressed to Evelyn's clothing. They caught a scent and pulled hard, following it for blocks, before stopping abruptly, the trail vanishing as if she'd been lifted straight from the ground into a car. But in the chaos of those early hours, critical errors unfolded. Neighbors and officers crowded the scene, trampling footprints, smudging blood, moving items that should have been left untouched. Evidence was handled with bare hands, contaminating what little trail existed. And while the town rallied in numbers, precious time slipped away. Because in cases like these, the first 24 hours decide everything. The Hartley family's world collapsed that night. Evelyn's father, still in shock from what he had found, made desperate calls. The father put a call. "This is Richard Hartley. My daughter, she's gone. She's not here. The house is a mess. Please send more help." Neighbors, drawn by the sirens and flashing lights, crowded the street. Some whispered questions. Did she run away? Did someone break in? Why would she leave her shoes behind? Inside the Hartley home, Evelyn's mother could barely speak. Her words turned into pleas. "If you've seen my daughter, please call. Please, she's only 15. The family's anguish poured into radio announcements, newspaper lines, and every neighborly conversation. Their voices carried beyond La Crosse into the heart of America, turning one family's nightmare into a community-wide desperation. But just as hope dimmed, something unexpected surfaced. A message, one that changed the direction of the case. La Crosse wasn't the kind of town where people locked their doors at night. In 1953, neighbors trusted each other. Families knew who lived up and down the block. But Evelyn's disappearance cracked that trust wide open. Suddenly, every man on the street was a suspect. Every shadow carried a question. Every alibi came with doubt. The first question investigators asked was the most basic. Was Evelyn targeted, or was this random? If she had been chosen, that meant someone knew she was babysitting that night. They knew the Hofer parents would be gone. They knew the house would be quiet. The little girl asleep upstairs. Was someone watching her long before she even walked through the door? But if it was random, if this was the work of a stranger passing through, then Evelyn may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A quiet neighborhood could easily look like opportunity to someone desperate, violent, or disturbed. Police began canvassing the area, knocking on doors, speaking to neighbors who swore they saw nothing, heard nothing. Yet, as the hours turned into days, whispers began to spread. A man walking alone that night, a car parked at the end of the block with its headlights off, a stranger seen lingering near the Hofer home weeks earlier, and then there were the neighbors themselves. Some residents remembered sounds, a muffled scream, or the frantic barking of dogs, but their recollections didn't match. Some swore they saw lights flickering in the Hofer home around 8:30. Others claimed the house looked completely still. Which accounts were real and which were invented by fear? The contradictions kept piling up. One man questioned by police said he'd been home all night, but his story shifted when officers pressed harder. Another insisted he never owned the type of pry bar that could have bent the window screen, yet a neighbor swore they'd seen him carrying one just weeks before. The rumors didn't stop with neighbors. Investigators quietly explored local men already known to police, a handyman with a history of breaking into houses, a farmer rumored to have a temper and a fascination with young girls, a drifter, arrested months earlier for trespassing, who had since vanished from town records. Each one became a name on a growing suspect list. And then the speculation widened, because just 4 years after Evelyn vanished, the state of Wisconsin would uncover its most notorious monster, Ed Gein. In 1957, Gein's farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin, just 130 miles from La Crosse, shocked the nation. Murder, grave robbing, a home filled with horrors too grotesque to imagine. His name instantly became tied to every unsolved case in the Midwest. Was Evelyn one of his early victims? Some believed so. The timing made sense. The location wasn't impossible, but police could never prove it. Gein admitted to crimes that made headlines around the world, but when asked about Evelyn, his answers were either silence or deflection. Still, the idea planted doubt in the public's mind. Maybe Evelyn's disappearance wasn't the work of a stranger passing through La Crosse. Maybe it was the handiwork of a man whose name would forever define American horror. But suspicion didn't stop at Gein. Police files show a list of locals questioned repeatedly. Men who had excuses that never quite added up. Men whose timelines had holes big enough to drive through. Some were eliminated. Others remained under a cloud of suspicion for decades. And in those contradictions, one detail stood out. Investigators noted that during follow-up questioning, one particular man grew nervous when asked about his possessions. His story about that night shifted each time he told it, and when officers finally searched his belongings, what they found wasn't what anyone expected, because inside those belongings was a clue that would change the direction of the entire case. By the dawn of October 25th, Evelyn Hartley's name was no longer confined to her family, her school, or the streets of La Crosse. It was splashed across the front pages of local newspapers, carried on radio broadcasts, and repeated in urgent tones by every reporter in Wisconsin. 15-year-old babysitter missing. Disappearance baffles police. Blood found at scene. The headlines alone were enough to ignite a wave of fear. But it wasn't just local fear.
Within days, her story had reached cities across the Midwest, even the East Coast. National reporters called it the babysitter's nightmare. Parents everywhere began to question something they had never thought twice about. Was it safe to leave their teenage daughters alone at night, watching someone else's children? What had once been a rite of passage, babysitting, that first step into responsibility and trust, was suddenly recast as danger. Families began locking their doors tighter. Girls begged their parents not to take babysitting jobs, and every parent who left their home at night looked twice at the streetlight shadows when they pulled away. Because Evelyn wasn't just a girl who vanished, she was now a symbol, a reminder that innocence wasn't safe, even in the heart of small-town America. The Hartley family quickly learned that with national coverage came national pressure. Reporters surrounded their home. Photographers camped outside, hoping to capture a shot of a grieving mother or a tired father. Every time Richard Hartley stepped onto his porch, he was met with flashes, questions, and microphones shoved toward his face. Do you believe she's still alive? Was she seeing anyone? Do you suspect foul play? Each answer he gave was printed the next morning, twisted into speculation, fueling endless cycles of rumor. Every word mattered, and every silence mattered more. For Evelyn's mother, the media attention was crushing. She struggled to hold her composure as strangers dissected her daughter's character in public. Some reports painted Evelyn as a model student, studious and kind. Others hinted, without evidence, that maybe she had secrets. Maybe she had snuck out. Maybe she had met someone. Each suggestion was like a blade to the family's already open wound. And then came the tips, hundreds of them. Phone calls, letters, anonymous notes slid under the police station door. Some claimed Evelyn had been seen hitchhiking near the river. Others swore she'd been spotted in another town, walking with a stranger. One caller insisted she was being held in a farmhouse just outside La Crosse. Another said they saw her at a bus station, boarding a bus bound for Chicago. Each tip sparked hope. Each one demanded resources, manpower, hours of searching, but time after time they ended in nothing. False leads, dead ends. The family's hope rose and fell with every rumor. Each time the phone rang, her parents braced themselves. Would this be the call that brought her home, or the one that broke them again? As the weeks dragged on, the story only grew. Posters with Evelyn's picture were plastered in shop windows and on telephone poles. Flyers were mailed to towns across Wisconsin. Radio stations aired her description daily. 5'5", brown hair, last seen wearing a white blouse and pink sweater. Her face became one of the most recognized in the state. For some, that recognition sparked compassion. Volunteers joined the search, digging through fields, combing the riverbanks, checking abandoned barns. But for others, it became a macabre fascination. People traveling into La Crosse simply to look at the crime scene, to say they had been there, to take something from the lawn as a souvenir. The line between genuine concern and spectacle blurred. Evelyn was no longer just a missing daughter. She was a headline, a talking point, a story that sold newspapers and boosted ratings. And with the frenzy came theories. Some whispered that Evelyn had staged her own disappearance, that maybe she wanted to escape, to run away from the quiet confines of La Crosse. But investigators quickly dismissed that. The broken glasses, the blood, the open windows, they spoke of violence, not escape. Others believed she had been taken by someone she knew, a neighbor, a classmate, a man who watched her closely, waiting for his moment. And then, of course, came the rumors of a drifter, a stranger passing through, slipping into town under the cover of darkness, taking Evelyn with him, and vanishing into the night. The problem was simple. Everyone had an opinion, and in that cloud of speculation, the truth grew harder to see. Meanwhile, the Hartley family was crumbling under the weight of the spotlight. Evelyn's father aged in weeks what should have taken years. He threw himself into the search, retracing routes, questioning neighbors, demanding updates from detectives. He couldn't rest. He wouldn't rest. Her mother rarely appeared in public anymore. When she did, she clutched a photograph of her daughter, her hands trembling, her voice breaking as she repeated the same plea. If you know where she is, please, I'm begging you, bring her home. Their pain became public property. Strangers wrote letters of comfort. Others sent cruel words, accusing the parents of negligence. As if losing a daughter wasn't enough, they were forced to defend themselves against a nation that thought it knew better. And yet, through it all, there was something strange, because while the media latched onto suspects, rumors, and ghost stories, investigators began noticing inconsistencies. Some of the loudest voices in the crowd were also the most suspicious. Certain tips didn't come from strangers at all, but from locals whose names would later appear in the case file. It raised a chilling possibility. While the cameras pointed one way, while the headlines screamed about drifters and monsters, the truth may have been hiding much closer to home. And while the media storm swallowed Evelyn's story, and while her family was crushed under the weight of false hope, one fact remained: the person responsible for Evelyn's disappearance may not have been far away at all, because sometimes the loudest noise is designed to cover the quiet truth. And in Evelyn's case, while the cameras pointed one way, the truth was hiding in plain sight. In the years following Evelyn Hartley's disappearance, Crosse became a town haunted not just by what was lost, but by what kept surfacing. Because when a case goes cold, silence isn't the only thing that lingers. Rumors start to take on lives of their own. Whispers spread into stories, and stories harden into legends. But in Evelyn's case, there was more than whispers. There were messages. Words that arrived like echoes from the darkness, some promising answers, others delivering only deeper lies. The first came in the form of phone calls. In the weeks after the disappearance, police logged dozens of calls claiming to know Evelyn's whereabouts. Some were frantic, voices swearing they saw her near a bus depot, or at a roadside diner, or walking with a stranger near Highway 16. Others were quieter, more deliberate, a man's voice, low and cold, saying, "You'll never find her." Then a click. Each call raised hope, then crushed it. Police chased them down, only to find dead ends, untraceable lines, or cruel hoaxes. Then came the letters. One envelope arrived at the La Crosse Tribune office. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a chilling message: "She fought, but she lost." Another letter was sent directly to the Hartleys. It was short, handwritten, the words jagged and hurried: "Stop looking. She's gone." The police tested the handwriting. They interviewed suspects. But each letter, no matter how eerie, led nowhere. Were these written by the person who took Evelyn? Or were they nothing more than sick pranks opportunists feeding off a family's agony? The truth was impossible to know. And then, over the decades, came the confessions. Prisoners, decades later, eager for attention or hoping for lighter sentences, claimed involvement in Evelyn's disappearance. Some said they had driven her across state lines. Others said she was buried under an abandoned property. Each confession sent detectives on frantic searches, digging up farms, combing wooded areas, even draining ponds. Each time nothing was found. The cycle repeated: a confession, a search, a disappointment. But among all the noise, there was one message, one statement that investigators could never shake. It came not in the heat of the moment, not in the early frenzy of 1953, but years later, long after Evelyn's name had faded from headlines. A man, questioned in connection with other crimes, made a chilling remark. He claimed to know what had happened to Evelyn. His words were blunt, stripped of emotion, and delivered with the kind of confidence only a guilty man could muster. Those words never appeared in the headlines. They weren't broadcast on radio or printed in the Tribune. They were buried in dusty police notes, whispered only among investigators. But for those who read them, they shifted everything. Because if what he said was true, then the narrative everyone had believed for decades was a lie. Imagine being Evelyn's parents. Imagine receiving calls, letters, and rumors for years, never knowing which ones were lies and which ones carried fragments of truth. Every message forced them to relive the night their daughter vanished. And yet one message stood apart. It didn't just claim to know where she was. It didn't just say what had happened. It exposed the lie that the crime scene told. The lie that Evelyn was taken quietly. The lie that she had no chance. The lie that the trail went cold. Because according to this message, Evelyn's story didn't end the way everyone believed. Tonight, for the first time in decades, we revisit that message, a statement that shattered the story everyone thought they knew. But I'm not going to reveal it yet, because to understand its weight, to understand why it still matters, we need to look deeper into what was left unanswered. So stay with me. By the end of this video, I will read you that message, the one that changed everything. Decades have passed since the night Evelyn Hartley vanished, but the questions, the ones that matter most, have never been answered. Why was her blood found in multiple places? It wasn't just inside the home, near the overturned lamp, or on the floor where her glasses broke. Blood was spotted outside, near the yard, even traced to neighboring properties. Did she struggle in more than one location? Was she dragged? Did she escape for a brief moment before being overpowered again? And then the bloody handprint, pressed against the side of a house just a few doors down. Whose hand was it? Was it Evelyn's, reaching out in desperation, trying to leave a trace of her last moments? Or was it the hand of her attacker, careless and hurried as he pulled her away into the darkness? If it was Evelyn's, why didn't anyone hear her? Why didn't anyone open their door? The footprints only add to the mystery. They led away from the Hofer home, only to vanish at the street. Did they stop because she was forced into a car? If so, whose car was it? Was it someone familiar in the neighborhood? Or was it a stranger who prowled the streets that night, waiting for opportunity? The questions grow heavier when we ask, was Evelyn truly the only victim? Because in the 1950s across the Midwest, other young women disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some were last seen walking home from school, others vanished from quiet neighborhoods just like Evelyn's. A chilling pattern that makes us ask, were these cases connected? Was there a predator traveling from town to town, hiding behind the face of normalcy, leaving families shattered in their wake? Some investigators believed it, others dismissed it as coincidence. But the timing, the geography, the similarities, they cannot be ignored. And then, the most haunting question of all, was the scene itself staged? Think about it. The overturned lamp, the neatly abandoned shoes, the broken glasses left in plain view. Were these the desperate signs of a struggle? Or were they arranged, placed to look that way, by someone who wanted investigators to believe a certain story? If Evelyn fought back, why didn't anyone hear the chaos? Why were the neighbors' accounts so contradictory? Why did some claim to see lights flickering at one time, while others swore the house was dark and silent? If someone staged the scene, what were they hiding? That Evelyn never left the neighborhood? That she was taken by someone closer than anyone realized? Or that the truth was far more disturbing than the story told by overturned furniture and a forced window screen? The silence of the case speaks louder than the evidence. Witnesses have died, records have been lost, memories have faded, and yet the blood, the handprint, the window, they remain frozen in time, fragments of a story that refuses to close. Some say Evelyn was buried near Crosse. Others insist she was driven out of state, lost forever in the endless Midwest highways. Still others believe she may rest in plain sight, her grave unmarked, hidden beneath structures that have since been built over. Every theory opens a door, but every door leads to another question. And this is why Evelyn's case endures. Not because we know what happened, but because we don't. Because the evidence doesn't line up neatly. Because the voices contradict each other. Because even now, after 7 decades, one truth keeps echoing through Crosse. The more we uncover, the more unanswered questions remain. And here's why this case may never truly be solved. For nearly 70 years, Evelyn Hartley's disappearance has remained one of America's most haunting mysteries. But among the endless rumors, tips, and confessions, there was one message investigators could never forget. It arrived decades later, long after the headlines faded. A letter, part confession, part map, suggesting Evelyn had been killed the very night she vanished, and buried not far from Crosse. Crews searched. Investigators dug, but no body was ever recovered. No final proof was ever found. To this day, that message hangs like a shadow over the case, a whisper of closure that never came. Evelyn Hartley was more than a case file. She was more than a headline. She was more than a babysitter. She was a daughter, a friend, a 15-year-old girl who should have had her whole life ahead of her. Instead, she became a reminder of how quickly innocence can vanish, how even in the safest homes, on the safest nights, darkness can slip through the door. If you believe Evelyn's story deserves answers, don't let her name fade. Subscribe, comment your name, and where you're watching from. And most importantly, share Evelyn's story, because the silence of unsolved cases is louder than words.